The Arizona sun blazed overhead as 3-year-old Sofia Martinez carefully patted down the sand in her small plastic bucket, her tiny tongue poking out in concentration. Her curly black hair was pulled back with her favorite purple ribbon, the one Grandma Rosa had brought from Mexico last Christmas. Carmen Martinez watched through the kitchen window as her daughter worked with the serious dedication only a toddler could muster, building what she proudly called Princess Castle No. 5 in their backyard sandbox. "Mommy, look!" Sofia called out, holding up her bright yellow shovel like a trophy. "It's going to be the biggest castle in the whole wide world." Carmen smiled and waved back, her heart swelling with the simple joy of watching her daughter play. The afternoon was perfect, not too hot despite the desert climate, with a gentle breeze rustling through the mesquite trees that lined their property. Their suburban neighborhood in Scottsdale was the kind of place where children rode bikes on sidewalks and neighbors knew each other's names. It was supposed to be safe. "I'm getting us some lemonade, Mia," Carmen called through the screen door. "Stay right there in your sandbox, okay?" "Okay, Mommy." "My castle needs a tower anyway." Carmen turned away from the window for exactly 30 seconds, just long enough to grab the pitcher of fresh lemonade from the refrigerator and pour 2 glasses. She had made it extra sweet, just the way Sofia liked it, with plenty of ice cubes that would clink pleasantly in the glass. She even added little paper umbrellas she'd been saving for a special occasion, thinking her daughter would giggle at the tiny decorations. But when Carmen pushed open the screen door, balancing both glasses carefully in her hands, the backyard was eerily quiet. The sandbox sat empty except for the abandoned yellow shovel and a half-finished sand castle that would never be completed. A gentle breeze caught Sofia's purple hair ribbon, which had somehow come loose and now fluttered against the wooden edge of the sandbox like a wounded butterfly. "Sofia?" Carmen's voice started as a question, almost casual. "Sofia, where? Are you, baby?" The glasses slipped from Carmen's hands, shattering against the patio stones and sending lemonade splashing across her bare feet. The paper umbrellas floated in the spreading puddle like tiny shipwrecks. "Sofia!" The scream tore from Carmen's throat as she ran barefoot through the yard, glass crunching beneath her feet, leaving small trails of blood that she didn't even notice. She checked behind the garden shed, under the back porch, inside the outdoor storage closet where they kept the lawn mower. Nothing. The back gate, always kept locked, hung open like an accusation. Carmen's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, appeared at the fence line, her elderly face creased with concern. "Carmen? What's wrong?" I heard screaming. "Sofia's gone." Carmen collapsed to her knees beside the sandbox, clutching the purple ribbon to her chest. "She was right here. She was right here 30 seconds ago." Mrs. Patterson didn't ask questions. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911 while Carmen frantically searched the same places over and over, as if her daughter might magically reappear behind the rose bushes or underneath the patio furniture. Within minutes, the quiet suburban street erupted with activity. Police cruisers arrived with lights flashing, but sirens turned off. Protocol for missing child calls to avoid causing panic that might interfere with witness statements. Detective Sarah Chun, a 15-year veteran with the Scottsdale Police Department, was first on scene. She found Carmen sitting in the sandbox, sand covering her clothes, tears streaming down her face as she held Sofia's favorite stuffed elephant. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm Detective Chun. We're going to find your daughter, but I need you to tell me exactly what happened." As Carmen recounted the 30 seconds that changed everything, Detective Chun radioed for the K9 unit. This was the golden hour, the crucial first 60 minutes when a missing child could still be found safe. Every second mattered. Officer Jake Morrison arrived 10 minutes later with Duke, his 4-year-old German Shepherd partner. Duke was a legend in the department, trained in both search and rescue and narcotics detection. His success rate for finding missing persons was unprecedented, and his gentle demeanor with children had made him the go-to K-9 for cases involving minors. Duke immediately went to work, his powerful nose investigating every inch of the sandbox. His tail remained low and focused. The body language Morrison had learned to read like a book. When Duke reached the back gate, his ears perked up and he looked back at Morrison with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to say, "This is where it starts." "She went out through here," Morrison confirmed to Detective Chun. "Duke's got her scent." Carmen watched from the patio as the German Shepherd worked with methodical precision, following an invisible trail that only he could detect. Every few steps, Duke would pause, lift his head to test the air, then continue forward with renewed purpose. "Please," Carmen whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to the officers, to God, or to the dog who represented her only hope. "Please, find my baby." The sun was beginning to lower in the western sky, casting long shadows across the yard where Sophia had been playing just 47 minutes earlier. Her sandbox toys remained scattered exactly where she had left them, waiting for small hands that might never return to finish Princess Castle number 5. Duke's focused whimpering from the front yard told Morrison they were on to something. The real search was about to begin. Duke's nose pressed close to the sidewalk as he followed Sophia's scent trail with unwavering determination. Officer Morrison kept pace behind him, reading every twitch of the German Shepherd's ears, every pause in his methodical tracking. They had moved 3 blocks from the Martinez house, Duke's confident stride telling Morrison that the scent was still strong, still fresh. "Good boy, Duke. Stay on it," Morrison murmured, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. In his 8 years working with K-9 units, he learned to trust Duke's instincts completely. The dog had never failed to find what he was looking for, but time was their enemy now. Detective Chun followed close behind, coordinating with dispatch through her radio. "We need units at a 3-block perimeter around Sunnyside Elementary," she commanded, "and get me traffic cam footage from Desert Ridge Boulevard between 2:30 and 3:15 p.m. The elementary school parking lot stretched before them like a concrete ocean. Duke had led them directly here, his pace never faltering until they reached the edge of the asphalt. Then something changed. The confident German Shepherd began, circling, his whimpering growing more frustrated with each pass. Morrison felt his heart sink. He's lost the trail. Duke circled the parking lot 3 times, his powerful nose working overtime, but the scent had vanished. Morrison knelt beside his partner, scratching behind the dog's ears. "It's okay, boy. You did good getting us this far." But Duke wasn't giving up. The intelligent animal suddenly bolted toward a row of cars parked near the school's main entrance. His tail went rigid as he approached a silver Honda Civic, and he began pawing at the ground near the driver's side door. "Chun, over here," Morrison called out. Duke's alerting on something. Detective Chun approached cautiously, pulling on latex gloves. On the asphalt beside the Honda, barely visible unless you knew what to look for, was a small scuff mark in the concrete and something else, a tiny piece of bright yellow plastic. "That's from Sophia's shovel," Chun said grimly, bagging the evidence, the one she was playing with in the sandbox. Morrison's radio crackled to life. "Unit 47, we've got footage from the traffic cam at Desert Ridge and Mountain View. Blue van, license partially obscured, heading eastbound at 3:22 p.m. Driver appears to be adult male. Can't make out passenger details." "Copy that," Morrison responded, his mind racing. Duke had lost Sophia's scent here because she'd been put into a vehicle. The yellow plastic fragment suggested a struggle, however brief. Mrs. Patterson from next door had arrived at the school, her face pale with worry. "I saw him," she told Detective Chun breathlessly. "I didn't think anything of it at the time, but there was a man in a baseball cap walking past our street this morning. He was moving slowly, looking at the houses. I thought he might be a realtor. Or something." "Can you describe him?" "Tall, maybe 6 feet. Dark clothing. The cap was blue, I think. He had a beard, kind of scraggly. And he was carrying a backpack." Mrs. Patterson's hands shook as she spoke. "Oh my God, was he watching Sophia?" Detective Chun's phone buzzed with a text from the station. The partial license plate from the traffic footage had been run through the system, generating a list of possible matches. One name jumped out immediately. Marcus Webb, 38, driving a blue 2015 Ford Transit van. His record showed prior arrests for stalking and disturbing the peace, though no convictions. "We need an APB on Marcus Webb," Chun radioed to dispatch. "Consider him armed and extremely dangerous. He may have a 3-year-old girl with him." Meanwhile, Duke had moved to another part of the parking lot, his nose working frantically along a chain-link fence that separated the school grounds from a residential area. Morrison followed, watching as his partner suddenly became agitated near a gap in the fence, a gap just wide enough for an adult to squeeze through. "Chun," Morrison called. Dukes found another trail. On the other side of the fence, in the backyard of a modest ranch house, they discovered more evidence. Footprints in the soft dirt of a flower bed, one set belonging to an adult male wearing work boots, and beside them, the tiny imprints of a child's bare feet. The homeowner, an elderly man named Frank Rodriguez, emerged from his back door looking confused. "Officers, what's going on?" "Sir, did you see anyone in your yard today? A man with a small child?" Frank's weathered face creased with concern. "Well, yes, actually. Around 3:30, I heard voices out here. When I looked out the window, I saw a tall fellow with a little girl. She seemed upset, crying. I thought maybe she'd fallen down, and he was helping her. They headed toward my driveway, toward the street." "Did you see what vehicle they got into?" "Blue van, parked right out front. I remember thinking it was odd, because we don't get many work vans in this neighborhood. The man seemed in a hurry." Detective Chun felt a chill run down her spine. The timeline was becoming clear. Webb had been watching the Martinez house, waiting for his opportunity. When Carmen went inside for those crucial 30 seconds, he'd struck. Sophia had been taken from her backyard, carried 3 blocks to the school parking lot where Webb's van was waiting, then transported to this quiet residential street where he could transfer her without being seen. Duke continued tracking, leading them to the street where Frank had seen the van. But here, on the hot asphalt, the scent trail ended completely. Sophia Martinez was now somewhere out there in a blue van with a dangerous stranger, and every passing minute took her further from home. Morrison's radio crackled again. "All units, we have a possible sighting of the suspect vehicle heading south on Highway 17. State police have been notified. This is now a multi-jurisdictional manhunt." As the sun began to set over the Arizona desert, Duke sat beside his partner, both of them staring down the empty road where Sophia's trail had gone cold. Morrison knelt and hugged the frustrated German shepherd. "Don't worry, boy. We're not giving up. We're going to find her." But time was running out, and everyone knew it. 24 hours had crawled by like an eternity. Carmen Martinez hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, and barely spoke except to answer the endless questions from investigators. Her husband Miguel had rushed home from his construction job, his work, clothes still covered in concrete dust as he paced their living room like a caged animal. The house that had once echoed with Sophia's laughter now felt like a tomb. Officer Morrison sat in the makeshift command center established in the Martinez's garage, studying surveillance footage on his laptop while Duke rested at his feet. The German Shepherd hadn't eaten much either. Dogs could sense human distress. And Duke seemed to understand that his work wasn't finished. Every few minutes, he would lift his head and look toward the door, as if expecting Sophia to come running through it. "Jake, we got something," Detective Chun called from across the room, holding up her phone. Highway Patrol found Webb's van, abandoned at a truck stop near Flagstaff. No sign of Sophia, but there's blood on the back seat. Morrison's stomach dropped. How much blood? Not enough to suggest serious injury. Could be from a small cut or scrape. Maybe she tried to fight back. The abandoned van had been discovered by a state trooper conducting routine patrols. Webb had apparently switched vehicles, but investigators were hopeful that Duke might be able to pick up a fresh trail. Within an hour, Morrison and Duke were speeding north on Interstate 17 in a convoy of police vehicles. The truck stop was a sprawling complex of gas pumps, restaurants, and a motel that had seen better days. Duke immediately went to work around the abandoned van, his nose cataloging every scent. When he reached the driver's side door, his tail went rigid, the alert signal that meant he'd found something significant. There, Morrison pointed to a small piece of fabric caught on the door handle. Pink cotton with tiny white flowers, the same pattern as the dress Sophia had been wearing when she disappeared. Duke circled the van methodically, then suddenly bolted toward the motel office. His nose led him along a specific path, from the van to the motel's side entrance, then down a narrow hallway to room 127. The door hung slightly ajar, and Morrison could smell something unsettling, the lingering odor of fast food mixed with something else he couldn't identify. "Police were coming in," Morrison announced before pushing the door open. The room was chaos. Fast food containers were scattered across the floor, along with children's items that made Morrison's blood run cold. Coloring books, crayons, small packages of fruit snacks, and a collection of stuffed animals arranged on the bed like an audience. Duct tape, rope, and plastic zip ties lay on the nightstand next to a burner phone and a stack of cash. But it was the walls that made Detective Chun step back in horror. Photographs covered every surface, dozens of them, all featuring children, playing in parks, walking to school, or riding bicycles. In the center of this disturbing gallery were recent photos of Sophia, clearly taken through the fence of her backyard over a period of weeks. Webb hadn't just spotted her randomly. He'd been stalking her, planning this abduction with meticulous care. "Jesus Christ," Sean whispered, photographing the evidence with her phone. He's been watching her for at least a month. Duke had moved to the bathroom, where he began pawing at the tiles near the bathtub. Morrison knelt beside his partner and discovered several long, dark hairs stuck to the drain, hairs that matched Sophia's texture and color. "He cleaned her up here," Morrison said grimly. "Changed her clothes, maybe cut her hair to alter her appearance." The motel clerk, a nervous young man named Danny, was brought in for questioning. His hands shook as he looked at Webb's booking information on his computer screen. "Yeah, I remember him," Danny said. "Checked in 2 days ago. Paid cash. Said he was traveling with his daughter to visit relatives in Utah. The little girl seemed real quiet, wouldn't make eye contact. I thought maybe she was just shy. Did you see them leave? Around noon yesterday. But here's the weird thing. He checked out alone. Said his daughter was sleeping in the car, but I looked out the window and didn't see any kid in his van." Detective Chun's phone buzzed with an urgent message from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. Webb's profile painted a picture of an increasingly desperate man, recently evicted from his apartment, unemployed for 6 months, with a history of mental health issues and obsessive behavior toward children. But they also discovered something that sent chills through the entire investigation. Team. Webb had been researching international borders, particularly crossing points into Mexico. Computer records from the motel's business center showed he'd been printing maps and looking up bus schedules to border towns. "He's running out of options," Chun told Morrison. "Desperate men make desperate choices. If he thinks we're closing in, he might." She didn't finish the sentence, but Morrison understood. They'd seen it before in cases like this. When predators felt cornered, children often paid the ultimate price. Duke suddenly became agitated, pacing between the motel room and the parking lot. His behavior suggested he was picking up multiple scent trails, as if Webb and Sophia had made several trips between the room and different vehicles. He switched cars here, Morrison realized. That's why Duke's confused. Sophia's scent is going in multiple directions. The motel's security cameras had been disabled, but traffic cameras from the nearby intersection provided a crucial break. At 12:47 p.m., they captured footage of a red pickup truck leaving the truck stop, the same truck that had been reported stolen from a Phoenix auto dealership 3 hours earlier. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, the search radius expanded to include 3 states and the Mexican border. Webb now had a 12-hour head start. Sophia was in a different vehicle, and every minute that passed decreased their chances of finding her alive. Duke lay down in the motel parking lot, his muzzle resting on his paws as he stared at the horizon. Even the most determined search dog in Arizona couldn't track a scent that had disappeared into thin air. Time was running out, and everyone knew. But Morrison knelt beside his faithful partner and whispered, "We're not giving up, boy. We're going to bring her home." The question was whether they'd be too late. The call came at 2:17 a.m., piercing through the tense silence of the command center like a gunshot. Detective Chun grabbed her phone on the first ring, her heart pounding as she recognized the number, Arizona Highway Patrol Dispatch. "Got eyes on your red pickup," the voice crackled through the speaker. "Truck stop outside Tucson, mile marker 89. Driver matches Webb's description, and there appears to be a small passenger." Morrison was already moving before Chun finished relaying the message. Duke sensed the urgency and bounded toward the patrol car, his tail high with anticipation. After 18 hours of dead ends and false leads, they finally had a solid sighting. The drive to Tucson took 43 minutes at emergency speeds, with Morrison pushing the speedometer past 90 while Duke rode shotgun, his nose pressed against the window as if he could already smell Sophia's trail. Chun coordinated with local units through her radio, establishing a perimeter around the truck stop while trying not to spook Webb into running again. The Oasis truck stop was a 24-hour haven for long-haul drivers. Bright lights, endless coffee, and enough noise to mask a child's cries. Morrison spotted the red pickup immediately, parked behind the diesel pumps where it would be partially hidden from the main road. "There," he whispered to Duke as they approached on foot. Through the truck's rear window, they could see a small figure huddled in the passenger seat. A little girl with dark hair, wearing clothes that didn't match the pink dress Sophia had been wearing when she disappeared. Webb was inside the convenience store, his back to the windows as he studied a road atlas at the magazine rack. His scraggly beard had been shaved off, and he wore a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. But there was no mistaking his tall, lean frame. "We need to move now," Sean whispered into her radio, "before he comes back to the truck." But as they approached the vehicle, Duke began exhibiting strange behavior. Instead of his usual confident alert, the German shepherd seemed confused, whimpering softly as he circled the truck. His nose worked frantically, but something wasn't right. Morrison's heart sank as he peered through the passenger window. The child in the seat was too old, maybe 7 or 8 years old, not 3. And when she turned toward them, her face was streaked with tears. But it wasn't Sophia. "That's not our girl," Morrison said into his radio, his voice heavy with disappointment. The reality hit them like a physical blow. Webb had switched children. Somewhere along his desperate flight, he'd abandoned Sophia and taken a different victim. The little girl in the truck was Maria Santos, reported missing from a Tucson playground just 6 hours earlier. Within minutes, the truck stop was swarming with law enforcement. Webb didn't resist when officers surrounded him inside the convenience store. He simply dropped his head and let the handcuffs click into place. But when they questioned him about Sophia's whereabouts, his response chilled everyone to the bone. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said with a vacant stare. "I've never seen any 3-year-old. The psychological evaluation would later reveal that Webb had suffered a complete mental break sometime during his flight from Arizona. In his fractured mind, he'd convinced himself that Maria Santos had always been his intended victim, and his memories of Sophia had been somehow erased or suppressed. But Duke wasn't giving up. While Webb was being processed, the German Shepherd continued working around the truck stop, his nose leading him to a disturbing discovery behind the building. In a dumpster, wrapped in a plastic bag, were Sophia's original clothes, the pink dress with white flowers that Carmen had dressed her in that terrible morning. "She was here," Morrison told Chun as they examined the evidence. "Maybe 12 hours ago, based on how fresh the scent is on these clothes." Duke's nose led them to a drainage culvert behind the truck stop where they found more evidence, a small sneaker that matched the description of what Sophia had been wearing, and scratches in the dirt that suggested someone small had tried to crawl through the narrow space. The local sheriff, Tom Bradley, had been working missing children cases for 20 years, and his weathered face showed the toll of seeing too much evil in the world. "If he left her here alone," Bradley said grimly, "in this desert, at night, ... He didn't need to finish. Everyone understood the implications. The Arizona desert was unforgiving. Temperatures dropped dramatically after sunset, and there were coyotes, snakes, and other dangers that could prove fatal to a small child. But Duke had other ideas. The German Shepherd suddenly bolted from the dumpster area, his nose locked onto a trail that led away from the truck stop and into the desert scrubland. His pace was urgent but controlled. The behavior Morrison had learned meant the scent was strong and recent. "She's alive," Morrison sighed, following his partner into the darkness. Duke only tracks like this when he's following a living person. The trail led them through mesquite bushes and over rocky terrain, Duke's powerful flashlight beam cutting through the desert night. After 20 minutes of hiking, they crested a small hill and saw something that made Morrison's heart leap. A tiny figure huddled beneath the highway overpass, about half a mile ahead. Through his binoculars, Morrison could see her clearly. Sophia Martinez, wearing only a diaper and an oversized men's t-shirt, curled up against a concrete pillar like she was trying to make herself invisible. She was alive. "I've got visual on the victim," Morrison radioed to the command post. "She's breathing, appears conscious. We're moving in." Duke bounded ahead, his tail wagging for the first time since the search began. As they approached the overpass, Sophia looked up with wide, frightened eyes. But when she saw the German Shepherd, something remarkable happened. Her tear-streaked face broke into the smallest of smiles. "Doggy," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying and dehydration. Morrison felt tears streaming down his own face as Duke gently approached the little girl, his training taking over. The German Shepherd lay down beside Sophia, offering his warmth and protection while Morrison called for paramedics. After 36 hours of terror, Sophia Martinez was going home. 8 months had passed since that terrifying night under the highway overpass. But for 3-year-old Sophia Martinez, the nightmare was far from over. She sat in Dr. Elena Vasquez's child psychology office, surrounded by colorful toys and gentle lighting, yet her small hands trembled whenever anyone mentioned a bad man who had taken her from her sandbox. Carmen Martinez watched through the one-way mirror as her daughter struggled to communicate with the therapist. Sophia, once a chattering, vivacious child who narrated every moment of her day, now spoke in whispers and only when directly asked questions. She had regressed in many ways, wetting the bed, refusing to play outside, and experiencing night terrors that left her screaming for Duke the doggy at 3 a.m. "She's making progress," Dr. Vasquez assured Carmen after the session. But testifying in court, "I'm not sure she's ready for that level of stress." The trauma of seeing Webb again could set her recovery back months, maybe years. District Attorney Rebecca Morrison, no relation to Officer Jake Morrison, paced her office as she reviewed the case files scattered across her conference table. The evidence against Marcus Webb was overwhelming. DNA, fingerprints, surveillance footage, and his own partial confession before his mental break. But without Sophia's testimony, the defense would likely argue that Webb's mental illness made him incapable of forming criminal intent. "We need her voice," Rebecca told Detective Chun during their weekly case review. "The jury needs to hear from the victim herself to understand the full impact of Webb did to this family." But Sophia's voice was precisely what they couldn't access. During the months following her rescue, she had spoken fewer than 50 words about her ordeal. Child psychologists had tried play therapy, art therapy, and even music therapy, but Sophia seemed to have locked away those 36 hours in a mental vault that she refused to open. The one exception was Duke. Officer Jake Morrison had visited the Martinez family every week since the rescue, bringing Duke for what Dr. Vasquez called therapy sessions. During these visits, Sophia transformed. She would run to Duke, Barry, her face in his thick fur, and whisper secrets that no adult had been able to coax from her. "She tells him everything," Carmen explained to Rebecca during a pre-trial meeting. "About the scary car, about being hungry, about hiding under the bridge. But only Duke. She won't repeat it to anyone else." This revelation sparked an idea that was both innovative and legally complex. Rebecca began researching precedents for using therapy animals in courtroom testimony. While emotional support animals had been used to comfort witnesses, having a canine officer present during a child victim's testimony was virtually unheard of. Meanwhile, Webb's defense attorney, Martin Cross, was preparing his own strategy. Cross was a veteran criminal defense lawyer who specialized in cases involving mental illness. His plan was to paint Webb as a deeply disturbed individual who is more victim than predator, someone who had suffered his own childhood trauma and was acting out of compulsion rather than malicious intent. "My client has no memory of abducting Sophia Martinez," Cross announced during a pre-trial hearing. The psychological evaluation clearly shows he was experiencing a severe dissociative episode. He cannot be held responsible for actions he doesn't remember committing. The legal battle was shaping up to be a clash between two narratives. The prosecution's story of a calculating predator who stalked and terrorized a child versus the defense's portrayal of a mentally ill man who needed treatment, not imprisonment. Dr. Michael Torres, the court-appointed psychiatrist who had evaluated Webb, painted a disturbing picture of the defendant's mental state. Mr. Webb exhibits classic signs of dissociative identity disorder, possibly triggered by severe childhood abuse. During his episodes, he appears to genuinely believe he's helping children, not harming them. But the prosecution had their own expert witness, Dr. Sarah Kim, a forensic psychologist who had studied hundreds of child predators. "Mental illness doesn't excuse predatory behavior," Dr. Kim testified during depositions. Webb's months of surveillance, his careful planning, his preparation of that motel room, these actions show clear intent and premeditation. As the trial date approached, Sophia's anxiety intensified. She began having more frequent nightmares. and her sessions with Dr. Vasquez became increasingly difficult. The little girl seemed to sense that something important was happening, something that involved the bad man she had tried so hard to forget. The breakthrough came during an unexpected moment. Officer Morrison had brought Duke for his regular visit when Sophia suddenly looked up from her coloring book and spoke in a clear, determined voice that surprised everyone in the room. "Duke found me," she said, her small hand resting on the German shepherd's head. "When I was scared and alone, Duke found me." The bad man went away, but Duke stayed. Carmen felt tears streaming down her face as she realized her daughter was finally beginning to process what had happened to her. But more importantly, Sophia was showing signs that she understood the difference between the person who had hurt her and the dog who had saved her. Rebecca Morrison saw an opportunity. If Sophia could distinguish between trauma and comfort, between fear and safety, perhaps there was a way to help her testify without re-traumatizing her. What if Duke could be in the courtroom with her? Rebecca proposed to Judge Patricia Hayes during a closed hearing, not as a gimmick or emotional manipulation, but as a legitimate therapeutic intervention that allows the victim to feel safe enough to tell her story. Judge Hayes, a mother of 2 young children herself, was initially skeptical. "Counselor, this is a courtroom, not a therapy session. We can't set a precedent that compromises the dignity of our judicial process." But as she listened to Dr. Vasquez explain Sophia's unique bond with Duke, and how the child had made more progress in 8 months with the dog than she might make in years without him, Judge Hayes began to reconsider. The decision would not only determine whether Sophia could testify effectively against her abductor, it would establish a groundbreaking precedent that could help child victims across the country find their voices in the pursuit of justice. With the trial scheduled to begin in just 2 weeks, everyone involved knew that Sophia's ability to face Webb in court might depend entirely on whether Duke would be allowed to stand beside her. Judge Patricia Hayes had made her decision at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before the trial was scheduled to begin. After reviewing hours of expert testimony, legal precedents from other states, and consulting with the Arizona Supreme Court, she issued a ruling that would make headlines across the nation. Duke would be allowed in the courtroom during Sophia's testimony. This court recognizes that extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures, Judge Hayes announced during the final pretrial hearing. The welfare of a child victim must take precedence over conventional courtroom protocol, provided we maintain the integrity of our judicial process. The media circus began immediately. News vans lined the streets around the Maricopa County Courthouse, their satellite dishes reaching toward the desert sky like mechanical prayers. CNN, NBC, Fox News, every major network wanted to cover what reporters were calling the dog trial of the century. Inside courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The gallery was packed beyond capacity, with overflow spectators listening through speakers in adjacent rooms. Carmen and Miguel Martinez sat in the front row, their hands clasped so tightly their knuckles had turned white. Carmen wore a simple blue dress, Sophia's favorite color, and clutched a small photo of her daughter from before the kidnapping. Marcus Webb sat at the defendant's table, flanked by his attorneys. 8 months in county jail had transformed him from the desperate, wild-eyed man who had been arrested at the truck stop. His hair was neatly combed, his beard trimmed, and he wore a conservative gray suit that his lawyer had carefully selected to make him appear less threatening. But his eyes remained vacant, staring at nothing, as if he were watching a movie that only he could see. District Attorney Rebecca Morrison stood to deliver her opening statement, her voice carrying clearly through the packed courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a predator who stalked an innocent child for weeks, who planned her abduction with meticulous care, and who subjected a 3-year-old girl to 36 hours of terror that she will carry. with her for the rest of her life. She gestured toward a large photograph of Sophia playing in her sandbox, the last picture taken of her before the kidnapping. Sophia Martinez was living the carefree life that every child deserves when the defendant ripped her from her family's backyard and thrust her into a nightmare that no adult should have to endure, let alone a toddler. Defense attorney Martin Cross countered with a different narrative entirely. My client, Marcus Webb, is not a monster, he told the jury, his voice filled with practiced compassion. He is a deeply troubled man who suffered horrific abuse as a child himself. The psychological evidence will show that Mr. Webb was experiencing a complete break from reality during the time period in question. He genuinely believed he was helping Sophia, not harming her. Cross paused dramatically, making eye contact with each juror. Mental illness is not a choice, ladies and gentlemen, and we cannot hold someone criminally responsible for actions they committed while their mind was fractured beyond recognition. The first week of testimony was methodical and devastating. Officer Jake Morrison took the stand to describe the search and rescue operation, his voice cracking slightly as he recounted finding Sophia's abandoned dress and the moment Duke finally located her under the highway overpass. When we found her, Morrison testified, she was dehydrated, hypothermic, and terrified. She couldn't speak, couldn't tell us what had happened. She just kept reaching for Duke. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Sophia's therapist, testified about the little girl's ongoing trauma. Sophia exhibits classic symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. She experiences night terrors, selective mutism, and severe anxiety around adult males who aren't family members. The psychological damage from her ordeal will likely affect her for years to come. But it was the testimony of Dr. Michael Torres, the court-appointed psychiatrist, that created the most dramatic moments in the courtroom. Mr. Webb exhibits clear signs of dissociative identity disorder, Dr. Torres explained to the jury. During his episodes, he truly believes he is protecting children, not abducting them. In his fractured mind, he was rescuing Sophia from some imagined danger. The prosecution fought back with their own expert witness, Dr. Sarah Kim, who challenged every aspect of Webb's mental health defense. The defendant's months of surveillance, his preparation of restraining materials, his research into border crossings. These actions demonstrate clear criminal intent. Mental illness does not excuse predatory behavior. As the second week began, anticipation reached a fever pitch. Everyone knew that Sophia's testimony would make or break the case. The little girl had been prepared as carefully as possible. Dr. Vasquez had worked with her for weeks, using dolls and drawings to help her practice telling her story. On Wednesday morning, Officer Morrison arrived at the courthouse with Duke, who was wearing his official K-9 unit vest. The German shepherd seemed to sense the importance of the moment, walking with dignified purpose through the metal detectors and past the crowds of reporters. In the witness preparation room, Sophia sat with her parents, wearing a pink dress that Carmen had bought specially for this day. When Duke entered the room, the transformation was immediate. Sophia's tense, shoulders relaxed as she buried her face in the dog's fur. "Are you ready, Mia?" Carmen asked gently. Sophia looked up at her mother with eyes that seemed far older than her 4 years. "Duke will stay with me?" "Yes, baby. Duke will stay right beside you the whole time." As they prepared to enter the courtroom, Rebecca Morrison knelt beside Sophia. "Remember, sweetheart, you just have to tell the truth about what happened. Duke will be right there, and your mommy and daddy will be watching to make sure you're safe." The courtroom doors opened, and every person in the packed gallery held their breath. This was the moment that would determine whether justice could be served for one of Arizona's most disturbing crimes. As Sophia walked toward the witness stand with Duke beside her, her small hand resting on his head, the silence was so complete you could hear the air conditioning humming. The next few minutes would change everything. The courtroom held its collective breath as 4-year-old Sofia Martinez approached the witness stand, her small hand resting protectively on Duke's head. The German Shepherd matched her pace perfectly, his training evident in every measured step. Judge Hayes had ordered the bailiff to lower the witness chair to accommodate Sofia's height, and a small step stool waited beside it. "Take your time, sweetheart," Judge Hayes said gently, her usual stern demeanor softened by the sight of the tiny witness. "Duke can sit right here beside you." Sofia climbed onto the chair, with Duke settling at her feet, his calm presence immediately visible in her relaxed posture. District Attorney Rebecca Morrison approached slowly, keeping her voice warm and conversational. "Sofia, can you tell us your full name?" "Sofia Maria Martinez," she replied clearly, her voice barely above a whisper, but audible throughout the silent courtroom. "And how old are you now?" "4." She held up 4 small fingers, then immediately placed her hand back on Duke's head. For the next 20 minutes, Rebecca carefully guided Sofia through her testimony. The little girl spoke in fragments about the scary man who took her from her sandbox, about being hungry and cold, about hiding under the big bridge. Her words were simple, but devastating in their innocence. "He said he was taking me to my mommy," Sofia whispered, tears beginning to form in her dark eyes. "But he was lying. He was a liar." Defense attorney Martin Cross had the difficult task of cross-examining a 4-year-old victim without appearing to attack a child in front of the jury. His approach was gentle, but persistent. "Sofia, sometimes when scary things happen, we remember them differently than they really were. Are you sure about everything you told us?" Sofia looked confused by the question. She glanced down at Duke, then back at Cross. "I remember hiding. I remember being scared. I remember Duke finding me." Cross tried a different angle. "The man. Who took you? Did he ever hurt you? Did he hit you or touch you in ways that made you uncomfortable?" Rebecca Morrison tensed, ready to object, but Sofia answered clearly. "He was mean. He made me get in his car. I didn't want to go." As Cross concluded his cross-examination, it seemed like the testimony had gone as well as anyone could hope. Sofia had been brave, coherent, and believable. The jury appeared moved by her simple, honest account. But then something unexpected happened. As the court prepared to excuse Sofia from the witness stand, Marcus Webb, who had remained silent and motionless throughout the entire trial, suddenly stood up at the defendant's table. His lawyers immediately tried to pull him back down, but Webb shrugged them off with surprising strength. "Wait," Webb said, his voice cutting through the courtroom like a knife. "I need to say something." Judge Hayes banged her gavel. "Mr. Webb, please sit down. Your attorneys will handle any statements." But Webb ignored the judge, his vacant eyes suddenly focusing with laser intensity on Sofia. For the first time since his arrest, he seemed completely lucid, completely present. "I remember now," he said, his voice growing louder. "I remember taking her. I remember everything." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Cross and his co-counsel frantically whispered urgent warnings to their client, while Rebecca Morrison shot to her feet, unsure whether to object or let this stunning development unfold. Sofia, who had been about to step down from the witness chair, froze when she heard Webb's voice. Her small body went rigid, and Duke immediately sensed her distress. The German Shepherd stood up, positioning himself between Sofia and Webb, his training kicking in as he assessed the potential threat. "Mr. Webb, sit down immediately," Judge Hayes commanded, her gavel striking the bench repeatedly. But Webb continued speaking, his confession pouring out in a rush of words. "I watched her for weeks. I planned it. I knew exactly what I was doing. When I took her from that sandbox, she was so small, so perfect, and I wanted—" His voice trailed off as he seemed to realize what he was admitting in front of a packed courtroom. The psychological break that had protected Webb from facing his crimes had finally shattered completely. Dr. Torres would later explain that confronting his victim face to face had triggered a complete restoration of his suppressed memories, and with them, the full weight of his guilt. Sophia began to tremble violently on the witness stand. The sound of Webb's voice had transported her back to those terrifying 36 hours. Duke, sensing her distress, moved closer to the witness chair and did something that brought gasps from everyone in the courtroom. The trained police dog, who had been taught to remain alert but calm in all situations, gently placed his front paws on the witness chair and nuzzled Sophia's arm. It was a clear violation of his training, but Duke's instincts as her protector overrode every command he'd ever learned. In that moment of chaos and fear, with Webb's confession echoing through the courtroom and her trauma threatening to overwhelm her, Sophia wrapped her arms around Duke's neck and spoke 2 words that would be remembered long after the trial ended. "Good boy." Her voice was clear, strong, and filled with absolute trust. In those 2 simple words, she communicated everything that mattered: her gratitude, her love, and her complete faith in the dog who had saved her life and was still protecting her. The packed courtroom fell completely silent. Jurors wiped tears from their eyes. Carmen Martinez sobbed openly in the gallery, while Miguel held her close. Even the court reporter paused, her fingers frozen over the keys as she absorbed the profound moment. Judge Hayes, a 20-year veteran of the bench who had seen every kind of courtroom drama, found herself struggling to maintain her composure. Webb's unexpected confession had just eliminated any doubt about his guilt, but it was Sophia's simple expression of love and trust that would haunt everyone present. "Good boy," she had said. And in those 2 words, a 4-year-old girl had shown an entire courtroom what courage, healing, and unconditional love looked like. The trial was essentially over. Webb's confession, combined with Sophia's brave testimony, had sealed his fate. But the image of a small girl finding comfort in her canine hero would inspire changes in courtrooms across America for years to come. The jury deliberated for exactly 47 minutes, the same amount of time Sophia had been missing before Duke first picked up her scent trail. When they returned to the courtroom, their faces showed the weight of what they had witnessed. But their verdict was unanimous and unwavering. "Guilty on all counts," the foreman announced, his voice steady despite the emotional toll of the trial. Marcus Webb sat motionless as Judge Hayes read his sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 25 years for aggravated kidnapping, child endangerment, and crossing state lines to evade prosecution. His spontaneous confession had eliminated any chance of a lesser sentence based on mental illness. "Mr. Webb," Judge Hayes said, looking directly at the defendant, "your crimes against an innocent child represent the worst of humanity. While this court recognizes that you suffer from mental illness, your own testimony proved that you knew the difference between right and wrong when you stalked, planned, and executed the kidnapping of Sophia Martinez." In the gallery, Carmen Martinez wept tears of relief, while Miguel held both his wife and daughter close. Sophia, now sitting between her parents, watched the proceedings with the serious expression of a child who had grown up too fast. When the bailiffs led Webb away in shackles, she didn't flinch. She simply reached down to pet Duke, who had remained by her side throughout the sentencing. The media explosion that followed was unprecedented. "Good boy," the 2 words that changed everything, became the headline in newspapers across the country. The video of Sophia's testimony, carefully edited to protect her privacy, was viewed millions of times online. Legal experts debated the implications of allowing therapy animals in courtrooms. while child psychologists praised the innovative approach that had given a voice to a traumatized victim. But for the Martinez family, the real work was just beginning. 6 months after the trial, Sophia started kindergarten at Desert Hills Elementary School. On her first day, she wore a bright yellow dress, no longer afraid of the color that reminded her of her sandbox shovel, and carried a small stuffed German shepherd in her backpack. Officer Jake Morrison and Duke had become regular visitors to the school, part of an innovative therapy program that Dr. Elena Vasquez had developed specifically for child trauma victims. Every Tuesday afternoon, Sophia and 3 other children, who had experienced various traumas, would spend an hour with Duke, learning to trust again through their interactions with the gentle giant who had saved one of their own. The healing isn't linear, Dr. Vasquez explained to a conference of child psychologists who had come to study the program. Sophia still has difficult days. She still sometimes wakes up crying in the middle of the night. But her connection with Duke has given her a way to process her trauma that traditional therapy alone couldn't achieve. The program, now called Project Good Boy in honor of Sophia's famous words, had attracted national attention. Grants from federal agencies and private foundations were funding similar programs in 12 other states. The Sophia Martinez Act, legislation requiring courts to allow certified therapy animals during child victim testimony, had been introduced in Congress with bipartisan support. 1 year after the trial, Carmen stood in their backyard watching Sophia play in a new sandbox that Miguel had built in a different corner of the yard. Their daughter was chattering away to her dolls, narrating an elaborate story about brave dogs who rescued princesses from dragons. Her vocabulary had not only returned but expanded, and her laughter once again filled their home. She's going to be okay, Dr. Vasquez had told them during their final regular therapy session. The trauma will always be part of her story, but it won't define her. She's learned that there are people and dogs who will protect her, who will fight for her, who will never give up on finding her when she's lost. Officer Morrison continued his regular visits, but now they were social calls rather than therapy sessions. Sophia would run to greet Duke at the door, always with the same words, "Good boy," followed by detailed reports about her week, her favorite subjects in school, new friends she'd made, books she was learning to read. During one such visit, Sophia made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I want to be a police dog trainer when I grow up," she declared with the absolute certainty that only 6-year-olds possess. "So I can teach dogs to find kids who are scared and lost." Morrison smiled as he watched her demonstrate the sit command she'd been teaching to her stuffed animals. "I think you'd be great at that job, Sophia." The legal precedents set by Sophia's case continued to impact courtrooms across the nation. Judge Patricia Hayes received the American Bar Association's Award for Innovation in Judicial Practice, recognizing her courage in allowing Duke's presence during testimony. Her decision had opened doors for hundreds of other child victims who found their voices with the help of 4-legged friends. Marcus Webb remained in Arizona State Prison, where he received treatment for his mental illness while serving his sentence. Prison records showed he never asked about Sophia or attempted to contact the family. Dr. Torres continued to study his case, contributing to research that might help prevent similar crimes in the future. 3 years after the trial, on a warm Arizona morning, Sophia stood on the playground at Desert Hills Elementary, surrounded by friends who knew her as the brave girl with the special dog friend who visited their school. She was 7 years old now, missing her 2 front teeth and wearing pigtails that bounced when she ran. When the school bell rang, signaling the end of recess, Sophia looked up at the desert sky and whispered words that had become her daily ritual. "Thank you for Duke. Thank you for bringing me home." As she raced toward the school building with her classmates, Her laughter carried on the desert breeze, the sound of a child who had survived the unthinkable and chosen to embrace joy anyway. Behind her, the sandbox where she now played during recess stood as a symbol not of fear, but of resilience. Sophia Martinez had found her voice, and with it, she had changed the world, 2 simple words at a time.